Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with another request video. And this was a request by Cynthia Cyn, a great subscriber, always leaves very kind comments, great person to talk to. So Cynthia, I'm glad to do this for you. This is a film I love to death, and she wanted me to do John Carpenter's The Thing. Which, one, yes, I do hate this cover. I found this very, very cheap. I just wanted to see it, wanted to have it. I do much prefer, the actual cover, like with the guy standing there with like the beam of light coming out off his face. But, like other DVDs and the Blu-ray has. Which, I've thought about getting this on Blu-ray. But, the DVD has John Carpenter's The Thing, Terror Takes Shape, which is an 80-minute documentary on the making of the film. And I guess the Blu-ray, it doesn't have the whole thing. And in order to see it, you have to like watch the movie. Then like an icon will show up. You click on it and it will sort of go over that portion. And it's not the full 80 minutes. Fuck that. I'd rather have the film by itself and the full 80-minute documentary by itself. So even though this covers absolute shit, I do like having that documentary. And it's one of the best, like, retrospective special feature documentaries that I've ever seen. Very in-depth, about everything. John Carpenter, how it came to be, talks a little bit about the original, the casting, the cinematography, the effects, the music. Very great making of. So, my personal history with The Thing is kind of strange because I put off this film for years. Because even though I'm a, devout horror fan, and this is known as one of the biggest classics, at least since the 80s. I've never been much of a sci-fi fan. I mean, it wasn't even until recent years that I even really get into Planet of the Apes. And, like, for sci-fi horror, I'm more so, like zombie films or, like, Reanimator, like a Mad Scientist or, like, a Frankenstein, something of that sort. I've never really been into anything that deals with space or aliens, which is also why I put off alien films for so long, which those I don't own. It's been forever since I've seen them. The only one I really like is Alien, the original one. So yeah, I put this off because I knew it was an alien flick, and people were giving me shit like, you're a horror fan? You've never seen John Carpenter's The Thing? And then eventually, my interest was piqued because my favorite reviewer on YouTube, a Rambo Rat for Life, this is his favorite horror film. And his enthusiasm and, with his reviews on it, made me want to see it, and I'm glad I did. It was probably been about, at least 6 years, maybe 7 years since the first time I saw it. I've seen it a handful of times since then. I just rewatched it. And the thing about The Thing is it's one of those movies that, when I first saw it, I enjoyed it. I thought, oh, that was actually worth checking out. But every time I watch it, I find a new love and appreciation for it. Like, every time I put it on, I'm just, I'm more and more sucked in, and I love it even more. And I mentioned several films throughout the 80s where it's just a testament to why practical effects will always be superior to CGI. Now, should CGI go away completely? No, because you can do miraculous things with it if it's used as an ingredient, not the whole cake. Other films like that I've mentioned: David Cronenberg's The Fly, Chuck Russell's The Blob, and this as being, the top 3 films that really showcase why practical effects are always phenomenal and far superior. This one being number one. This movie probably has my all-time favorite special effects in any movie. Very, very close second to Cronenberg's The Fly, but this movie is just fucking mind-blowing. I mean, every effect, yeah, it's horrific and horrible, but it's just as beautiful to look at. Especially since the effects were done by Rob Bottin, who I think was 20 or 21 at the time. And he did have some help because he was kind of burning himself out from Stan Winston. You know, one of the biggest creature effect and animatronic creators in film history. I think he helped out a lot with some of the more animatronic stuff. But Rob Bottin was given pretty much creative control over, you know, the creatures and the effects. Now, of course, this is also a remake of the 1951 film. I think it's 1951, called The Thing from Another World. Which that was more like a guy in a suit playing an alien, which I've never seen, but I've heard good things about it. And that is based on a short story called Who Goes There, which I believe was from the 20s. And Carpenter, he saw the original Thing from Another World as a child in the theaters, and he thought it was very scary, very well done. And then he read the short story in high school, and he realized that the short story and the original film differed. Because I guess where the original film was more just about the alien and being like a sci-fi B-movie, the novel, or the short story rather, focused heavily more on the breakdown of the group of characters. Dread, distrust, the fact that this thing can do a perfect imitation of whoever it, you know, assimilates, you know, the host, if you will. And that's what Carpenter was more interested in, more focusing on, yeah, having this great creature feature would be awesome, but he really wanted to focus on the characters, the downfall of the characters, and their trust, and I guess betrayal, and did a phenomenal job. And even before I get into the plot, everything about this movie works. This is tied with my favorite Carpenter film, or tied for my favorite Carpenter film with the original Halloween. Of course, the original Halloween, you know, I'm more of a slasher guy than like a sci-fi horror guy. So Halloween's always probably going to have, you know, that edge on top of it. But I would say this is his most ambitious. I know this is the film he's most proud of. I think this was the one he had the most time to work on. And, I mean, everything from the cast, to the location, the setting, the atmosphere, the music. Because it stars Kurt Russell as pilot R.J. McCready. And the thing about Kurt Russell is, one, he's a badass. But he was sort of like the badass Bruce Willis type actor before Bruce Willis. And mostly in Carpenter films. But it seems like a lot of his badass roles, he's sort of doing something else. Like Escape from New York, he has sort of a Clint Eastwood approach. Big Trouble in Little China, he has a bit of a John Wayne thing going on. Hateful Eight, he definitely has John Wayne, but of course that's Tarantino. This, Kurt Russell's playing a badass as Kurt Russell. He's playing him straight, and this is my favorite Kurt Russell performance. And also, this is a cast of all men, which you don't really see. Even at that time you didn't, because I mean this was 1982, so I mean this was the dawn of the slasher explosion, when you have, you know, this. You had to have the final girl. You had to have the sort of sluttier, more promiscuous girls, more gender diversity. But this one was all men, and it kind of added that layer of interest because it's something you don't generally see. But I mean, amongst the other cast, I mean, you have Keith David as Childs in an earlier role, and I mean, Keith David, he was in Requiem for a Dream, bunch of voiceover work. Of course, I know him best for voiceover work as Spawn in the HBO animated series, which was phenomenal. I have the first 2 volumes. They're kind of scratched up and don't really work that well. I need to get the full collection, but I thought that was a great series. There's also Wilford Brimley, yeah, of diabetes himself, without the mustache. You know, who else? You have T.K. Carter as Knowles, who I remember as a kid was an older version of Saved by the Bell. Richard Dysart as Dr. Copper. Character actor Charles Hallahan, who he's one of those character actors everybody's seen him before. In fact, I think a lot of people will know him from Space Jam. The guy that tells Wayne Knight to make sure no one bothers Michael Jordan. He's in this as Norris. Peter Maloney as Bennings. Richard Masur as Clark. He played adult Stan in the first Stephen King's It, the TV miniseries, the guy that slits his wrist at the end of the first one. Daniel Moffat is Gary. Joe Polis is Fuchs. Thomas Waits as Windows, which that can't be the same. No, different Tom Waits. But Thomas Waits as Windows, he was in And Justice for All, which is a great Al Pacino film, one of his best. So anyway, they're all scientists, or Kurt Russell's actually a pilot, helicopter pilot. It's the first week of winter, Antarctica, 1982. It opens up with this Norwegian chopper chasing a sled dog and shooting at it. We don't know why. It opens up with a great Carpenter score, which is like this boom, 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 boom. Which, I mean, he did do a lot of the music, but the credit actually goes to Ennio Morricone, which some of his unused music went on to be in The Hateful Eight, which is sort of half of this. It's sort of half the thing. Tarantino even said Hateful Eight is The Thing mixed with Reservoir Dogs, which I may get into that. But, well, the music in Hateful Eight during the Poison Coffee, you know, that bum bum bum, dun 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 dun, it just keeps building up. I think that was supposed to be during the blood test scene. And then the music when they first discover the spaceship in the ice, you know, the violin, you know, really opening up music. That was when Samuel Jackson goes to shoot Daisy and he runs out of bullets in Hateful Eight. But anyway, so they shoot the Norwegian, they take the dog in, and the dog, I mean, I've heard a lot of people, a lot of reviewers say the dog should have been nominated for an Oscar. Because, I mean, you don't see dogs this well trained in film. I mean, every cue this dog does correctly. And there's even, so we're supposed to get there's something off about the dog. And there's a scene where, at the very beginning, where the dog is kind of walking around, checking everybody out. And it goes in this room, and you just see the silhouette of a character, but it doesn't show who it is. So we're supposed to believe, okay, dog is obviously the Thing. He's now imitating this person. And I don't know if this is a story or not, but supposedly, the person that's casting that silhouette is not one of the cast members. Apparently, John Carpenter thought if he used a cast member, audiences would sort of be able to determine who it is by the silhouette. So by getting a non-cast member, he thought audiences wouldn't be able to tell and it would throw them off, which was a really neat thought, a neat idea. It was this really slow build-up up until about the 28-minute mark, where Clark, played by Richard Masur, who's sort of the quiet loner, he relates more to the dogs and the scientists or the researchers. He goes to put the dog in the kennel with the other ones, and it just kind of sits there. Then all of a sudden it just starts like shaking its head, and its fucking face peels open. And that's when we get the first scene of anything. You know, its face splits open, it's spitting this acid at this other dog. Dogs are going crazy. It has these like weird like tentacle things coming out of it, flopping around. So then, you know, they all get to the kennel to check it out. And, you know, that's when we see it kind of sort of looking like a dog. And it kind of opens up and there's like this flower. It looks like a flower that opens up. And the petals, if you look closely, they're actually supposed to be dog tongues. When it opens up, it's like lined with dog teeth. Further to go in with how, you know, this thing is this sort of parasitic entity that assimilates an organism, does a perfect imitation, and it just keeps moving on from one to the other, becoming one collective organism. But when the imitation process is interrupted, that's when you get these grotesque creatures. And just the fact that it had those dog tongues just shows it's trying to imitate, but it hasn't got it right yet. Like, it hasn't fully downloaded. And, you know, there's parts where, like, Kurt Russell and some of the other characters go check out the Norwegian camp, see a bunch of shit that's gone wrong, an axe in the wall, a guy that slit his throat and his wrists, and it's all frozen. That's where they find the two-headed thing that they bring back with them. Then they watch all this footage from the camp, and it shows there's something in the ice, so they go back and there's this giant spaceship that's supposedly been there for like maybe thousands of years. And also the placement of exposition is well done, because they, you know, they burn the dogs, and this one guy, Fuchs, he pulls McCready aside and he says, you know, even when it's burnt, there's still cells that are alive that can still, you know, do its thing. And then right after that, because there's windows and beddings in one room getting like the two-headed thing set aside, so they can still claim it as a find, but so it's left alone. Windows leaves, we get that exposition. Then when he comes back, there's just like bloody clothes. And he looks in the corner, and Bennings is like shirtless. He's kind of writhing with tentacles all around him. You know, normally I think we would have had that scene, be like, what the hell is going on, and then have the exposition. But they have the exposition, so when Windows gets back to the room and sees the bloody clothes, we're like, oh, fuck. And that, I think, is the creepiest scene in the film, because now they're looking for Bennings, and he's outside, and he's like, sort of back to, and the imitation process has been interrupted. So he has like these really long, like salad fingers almost, and he just does this. Oh. Just, and the way the lighting is, just very creepy. And the lighting, of course, you know, since it's John Carpenter, big advocate for natural lighting. You get a lot of great colors. You know, like they're outside a lot, where all they have are flares. So there's a lot of like blues and purples and like reds. Looks excellent. And even when they use flares, there's lens flares. You know, like, say like this is the light from the flare, but there's like things like coming off of it across your screen, which normally that would kind of kill the aesthetic of being a film. It would show it, oh, that's like something technical, I'm watching a movie. But with this, it really helps add character, and I really like that. And so from then, it's just, you know, the downfall of trust. Nobody can trust anybody. They're always at each other's throats. You know, Kurt Russell sort of takes upon himself to be the leader. You know, he's like, you two go check that. You two go check this. And everyone's like, I'm not going with him. I don't want to go with him. I'd rather go with him. And all the actors are just, you know, even though, you know, some of them barely have any lines, they still bring their A game. It's all very believable. And, you know, I really like the scene where Kurt Russell, Knowles, and Windows, they all go out. They go outside for some reason. And then Knowles comes back alone. And, you know, he's all like, his lips are purple. He's a black gentleman, but like, so his skin's like gray because like the frost. And like, you know how like when you get really cold, your mouth kind of does what it wants. And it looks natural. Like, I know they kept the set refrigerated because they're actually filming during the summer. And the interiors, I think, are actually filmed in LA. But he looks like he's freezing. And then like Kurt Russell comes back in, and his beard, his hair is full of like frost, and he's all like purple around his eyes. Oh, which also, much before that, Wilford Brimley, who's like the top researcher and scientist, he's on this computer, ancient-ass computer, that sort of shows how it assimilates, imitates, moves on, and it calculates, you know, how long it would take over the world if it reached civilization, and it's like a matter of days. So he goes nuts, and he just starts smashing shit, kind of like The Shining. Smashes the radio, smashes the computers, kills the rest of the dogs, wrecks the helicopter and the tractor. So they lock him up in the shack outside. And yeah, it's just, it is sort of build up and dread until the next big thing scene. Like Norris, played by Charles Hallahan, he just sort of dies, I guess, or has like a heart attack. So they get him up on the table, and, you know, one of the doctors was tied up. They let him, you know, do his thing. So he's using a defibrillator. And when he goes down, his torso opens up like a bear trap, clamps the doctor's arms in, and they actually got an amputee to like wear like, you know, like the latex so they could show like his hands cut off. So they're trying to get the flamethrower to go, and like, so this big Norris monster is this big, like, almost phallic looking thing with a head on it that looks just like Charlie Hallahan. All the while his head is like stretching, and just the effects in this fucking scene, all practical. You know, like the skin is like stretching, and like all the tendons and everything is like green, and it, you know, I guess it's made out of like melted rubber and gum, but like it just pulls and it just like snaps like cheese in a cartoon. All practical. And also when he goes down with the defibrillator and the chest opens up, that's a dummy. But, you know, the skin and the chest hair all looks real, like painstakingly accurate. The head pulls off, then of course it gets like these spider legs and little like eyes. The creatures are very Lovecraftian, which I give props to because I'm a fan of H.P. Lovecraft. And I really like the designs of the monsters. That's probably the biggest and my favorite like effect scene. But my favorite scene overall is when Kurt Russell tries to get control over the group again and figure out who's who, so he does this blood test. He says, you know, seeing the defibrillator and the creature trying to defend itself gave him the idea where, you know, everyone's tied up. He gets a blood sample. He has the flamethrower and copper wire. Heats up the wire, touches the blood. In theory, if you're human, the blood will just sizzle. But if you're the thing, the cells in that blood will try to defend itself and fight back, so something will happen. And this scene is so perfectly orchestrated, which if it had that music from the Poison Coffee scene in Hateful Eight, like I think it was intended to, it would have been just as beautifully orchestrated as that scene. The way the music is, the way everybody looks at each other, how long it is. Because in this, you know, there's a lot of talks like people saying, you know, this isn't going to solve anything. It's like, well, we'll just see, won't we? Close-ups of everyone being really intense, you know, scared to find out, because at this point nobody even knows if they are the thing. They don't even know if they themselves are. So if something happens to their blood, they're going to get toasted with the flamethrower. So everyone's on edge. The facial acting is great. And it's just long enough. Like, he does, like, I think, like 3 or 4 tests that turn out to be human. And then finally just comes out of nowhere and it's this guy Palmer. Which he's kind of, like, sitting in his chair. And then it cuts away to everyone panicking. When it cuts back to him, his, like, this big, like, head, like, his eyeballs are, like, popping out of his head. And then, like, that guy Windows, because the flamethrowers won't work, he walks up to Windows and, like, his head splits like a Venus flytrap. And granted, this scene is kind of Evil Dead 2-y, kind of silly. At least when compared to the tone of the rest of the film. And so then, you know, at that point, they go out to give Blair the test, Wilford Brimley. They find a tunnel deep into the snow, and they find, like, this spaceship built out of salvage parts from the helicopter and everything. So, you know, he is the thing. And there's another great scene where he tries to absorb this older guy, Gary. He goes like this, but, like, his fingers go under his skin, so you can see, like, the bulges of his fingers under his skin. Then it cuts to, like, Kurt Russell and the other guys doing stuff. When it cuts back to him, the guy's on the ground, but his mouth is, like, stretched out, and Wilford Brimley's, like, dragging him. It's a very quick scene. And then you get, like, the Norse monster. There's a little bit of stop animation, which I'm a huge sucker for. I love stop motion. The Norse monster is, I think, like, the biggest and most grandiose. But my favorite would still be the Norris stuff. Bendings is the creepiest. Norris is my favorite, like, creature effects scene. The blood test is my favorite scene over the whole film. And I really like the ending because the only two that are left are Kurt Russell and Childs, Keith David. The whole place is burnt down. They've already exploded rather. They talk about how, you know, within the next hour it's going to be 100 below zero. No way to survive. Even if we don't make it, we have to kill this thing. So, you know, it can't go back to sleep in the snow. Rescue team comes. It starts doing its thing to them. So that's when they fight back. And yeah, it is nihilistic because it does end with them just sitting by the burning rubble of the camp. It just kind of pans out with that bum bum, bum bum. With total ambiguity of if they're going to get rescued or if they did kill the thing. Most likely they're not. And there's a fan theory about the ending, which normally fan theories, you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. Kind of bullshit, most of them are. You can kind of see where they're coming from. I can totally get behind this fan theory. It makes total sense. Now, I'm not going with that is what happened in the film. I'm just saying it's an interesting concept. After everything's blown up, and it's just Kurt Russell and Keith David, and they talk about how, like, maybe we shouldn't survive. What should we do? Like, let's just sit here and see what happens. Kurt Russell gives Keith David a bottle of J&B whiskey. Kurt Russell doesn't take a sip out of it. He gives it to Keith David. He drinks it, and he's fine. And then Kurt Russell just kind of chuckles to himself. And that's when it pans out. The fan theory is Kurt Russell took that bottle and put gasoline in it. Because the thing, you know, it's not going to be hurt by gasoline. It's not going to know the difference between gasoline and whiskey. So, you know, if he drank it and spit it out, it was like, the fuck is this? He would know it's human. But since he drank it and he was fine, that's when Kurt Russell was like, okay, now you're the thing. It's like, There's nothing I can do about it. Then it ends. Very interesting fan theory. I'm not going with that is how it ends. I'm just saying, you know, I really like that idea. And I mean, I can't talk up the special effects enough. The special effects are really... And I mean, a lot of movies that have great special effects, it's like that's the show, that's the scene stealer. But everything about this, the music, the atmosphere, the acting, the lighting, the cinematography, or director of photography done by Dean Cundey, who also did Halloween with John Carpenter, and The Fog. And I think a few other ones. Just everything is great about this. I mean, all the creatures, they look so realistic. I guess they always had like a number of 5-gallon buckets of KY jelly to keep them looking all moist and slick. Even the title sequence where it's like the letters, like the black, but like the letters burning with light shining through. That was just done with a fish tank, a black trash bag, and a lighter. Effects, top fucking notch. Rob Bottin did a fantastic job. I think this was nominated for some Razzies, because this movie was ravaged by critics. Eaten alive. Again, it did come out the same year as E.T., so I think it came out a little bit after E.T. So you have this cute, family, sentimental film about a friendly alien, and now you have this nihilistic, nobody safe, bleak alien, imitating, trying to take over the world. But fans picked it up sooner than critics. Critics just hopped right on this, calling it garbage and trash, and pretty much acting like a DC fan every time a DC film comes out, no matter how good it is. Garbage is trash. But in retrospect, it's gained a lot of love and respect. I love it. Every time I watch it, I find new shit, new appreciation. I think it was in the 90s or early 2000s, John Carpenter wanted to do a sequel. He had Kurt Russell and Keith David on board. He was going to give them Frostbite, talk about how they got saved, their life since. And who was it? Universal said, nope, don't want to do that. That's not interesting. So they did the prequel about the Norwegian camp. Came out in 2011. I haven't seen it. I'll probably see it just so I can rant on the fucking thing. Because I've seen clips. Horrendous fucking CGI. Horrendous. Beautiful. I would say the best practical effects in any movie. Go from this to just a CGI shitstorm. And yeah, the whole thing about, Hateful Eight, you have a white guy and a black guy are sort of at each other's throats. Of course, with this, it's trust. With that, it's more like racial issues. They go through all this shit, then eventually those two are the only ones left, and there's a good chance they're probably not going to make it out there, not in a good position. Sort of like Hateful Eight. But yeah, I'm sure there's more I wanted to talk about, because this is a movie I can go on for a while. But just such a great movie. And it's pretty amazing to have a movie about this alien and really have it be a special effects film. Like an effects artist's wet dream. That is what it is. But still have the whole character drama with dread and distrust and isolation be just as interesting is pretty amazing. Yeah, tied with Halloween for my favorite John Carpenter film. I might even say this is a better made film and more ambitious. I'm just more of a slasher film guy. And another brilliant thing is we never see the thing in its true form. It's a thing that imitates. And when the imitation process gets fucked up, that's when it looks fucked up. Any other director or studio would have pushed, you got to show it. People came here to see it. They want to see the thing. No. This did it perfectly. By far my favorite movie with an alien or alien, horror film. Favorite sci-fi horror film of this nature. Granted, yes, I do like Reanimator more, like Frankenstein more, like sort of that kind of sci-fi. But with whole space and aliens and shit, this one is my favorite. John Carpenter's The Thing. Great, great, great movie. Fucking classic. Another testament to why practical effects should never die. And while they'll always be far superior. So, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this review. Cynthia Cyn, I hope you enjoyed it. And you guys can let me know what you think. John Carpenter's The Thing is fucking awesome. Thank you for watching.